Here we are again sitting in the waiting room in front of the office of the marriage therapist that my wife chose for us. We meet with her once a week, and this is our 12th visit. The therapist doesn't know it yet, but this is also our last visit. I have prepared a surprise for both my wife and our therapist, and in the future, they can get together without me to figure out where they went wrong. My wife can pay. You hear stories about therapists like this one, but I never thought I would deal with one like this. I call her charlatan. She's a husband-hating bitch, and it's no harder than it sounds. She lives to make excuses for women and their bad behavior. My wife chose it despite my objections. Big surprise. We could choose a legitimate therapist together, interview them, develop mutual trust in the one we choose, and move forward to do the difficult work together. But that did not happen. Ruth needed to stack the deck so she could control the meetings. It's not that I'm against therapy, I just don't think it's therapy. Every complaint my wife makes comes back to me with the words, "David, what you need to understand is that you did not provide for your wife." Well, at least it will end today. I think it's worth taking a quick look at what brought us to this point. We got married right out of college 25 years ago. We have 2 children, a boy and a girl, both in college. They are great kids, but don't ask me how. I tried to be the best father I could be, but my wife was missing so often that my own children jokingly called me Pom, as in mom-dad, when I tried to fill the void. The first time they did this, I was offended, but quickly realized that they saw that I was both a mother and a father to them. I made their school lunches, helped with their homework, took them to Little League and soccer games, met with their teachers, and heck, most of the time, cooked dinner and washed the dishes. My wife's contribution seemed to consist of her complaining about how important her low-paying job was, complaining about me, and being too tired to do anything. This is not entirely fair. She did contribute, but over the years, she seemed to become less involved with the family and more preoccupied with life outside the home. Complaints about work gave way to complaints about me. I never did enough, or I didn't do it right, or we didn't have enough money, or we didn't take the best vacations, or whatever else her dissatisfaction made her focus on. The children saw this, and when they grew up, I began to often hear, "Dad, you are the best." And it was all worth it. You know the old story about how to boil a frog? I was that frog. So, this frog finally had enough, and I jumped out of the pan. I spent most of my adult life trying to figure out what was wrong with my wife. She grew up in a dysfunctional family. This would be something you would read about in horror movies, if horror movies were about parents stalking their children. Her mother was a serial adulteress who used her daughter to cover up her infidelities. As a child, she was taught never to tell her father what really happened during those shopping trips. Her father was not stupid, but he was weak and, as you can imagine, a broken man. He was a mouse that growls. So painfully shy that he could barely hold a conversation, he would go out for a drink after work and then raise hell when he got home. The house became a battlefield where there was no real communication, no time together, no joy. As a child, my wife would see the evening approaching, gather some food, and stay in her bedroom to avoid hostilities in the rest of the house. Is it any wonder that she became what she became? Deceit and manipulation were her thing, and it took me decades to realize that she was deeply broken and could never truly live in a marriage. This understanding eased the pain, and my love for my children kept me going until they grew up. I actually saw a therapist for a while. I explained to her the picture I had seen, told her about Ruth's childhood, and continued to ask what I could do to fix the slow breakdown of my marriage. She patiently explained to me that she could only help the one in front of her, and that was me. She taught me to take care of myself, to stand up for myself, and to not get sucked into the hole of empty life that Ruth's existence had become. I learned to focus on my children, live for them, and keep the door open in case Ruth ever decided to join the family. Now that the kids were in college, I knew the end was near. I couldn't go on like this, and I was pretty sure that Ruth would destroy our marriage very soon. You see, my own therapist explained to me that when a child grows up in chaos, he adapts to it. I know it sounds crazy, but she said that when life was going well, Ruth would blow things up because chaos was what she was most comfortable with. It was a revelation. I thought, After all, I'm not crazy. I saw this pattern, but did not believe in it. Now that the kids are off to college, our finances are under control. The house is almost paid off, and the two of us have enough free time to enjoy our time together. She was destined to ruin everything. My thoughts were interrupted by the door to the inner office opening and another couple entering the waiting room. The husband looked tearful, and the wife looked smug. The charlatan earned her salary for this session. By then, I already knew how to act. We waited for the charlatan to write her notes about the last session, and then the door would open. "Ruth, I'm ready to meet you and David." That was her way of saying, "I washed off the blood, so bring the next victim." Ruth sat on the sofa, and charlatan always expected me to sit next to her, but this time I chose the chair to Ruth's right, with my back to the door. "David, please sit down with your wife." "Sorry, but I can see her better from here. Besides, my back hurts, and this sofa has never been comfortable for me." God, that was an understatement. The charlatan looks annoyed and said, "David, is there anything you want to say after our last meeting?" "Yes, I want to. We keep coming here, supposedly working on our marriage, but I still can't shake the thought that my wife is cheating on me. I can't forget about it, and nothing said here will change my mind." The charlatan didn't even wait for my wife to speak. "David, I already told you that I am absolutely sure that Ruth is not cheating on you. We talked to her, and I am convinced that all this is only in your thoughts. You have to give it up and move on." She doesn't even wait for my answer. "Ruth, what do you want to talk about today? She didn't hide her bias, did she?" Ruth went through a mental list of my shortcomings and settled on, "He doesn't support me." That's all it took, and she was off to the races. "He complains when I work late, and I just want to go out with friends sometimes to unwind," Ruth complained, and charlatan nodded her head. Everything was the same as in every session. I knew Ruth would continue for a long time, so I let my thoughts wander. Early in our therapy, in one of our one-on-one sessions, before I even realized that our therapist had an agenda, I told her that I thought my wife had been unfaithful in the past. I didn't have any proof. It was just a feeling. The charlatan shut me down, rejected the very idea of it, and said that it was all in my head. After 2 months, my doubts grew into confidence, and her opinion went out the window when I began to prepare for war. The preparation took some time. "David? David, you listen?" "Oh, yes, I'm listening." "I don't support her. Ruth said you are ignoring her and her needs. You don't support her when she has to work late, and you get jealous when she wants to spend a few hours with her friends. Well, I keep coming back to the feeling I have that she's not being faithful to the marriage." Now the charlatan couldn't even hide her contempt. "David, deal with it and be a man. I told you, she's not cheating on you. Your wife needs a man who can take charge, but if you continue to behave like this, perhaps she should find someone else." The charlatan just shook her head in disgust. "Ruth, you said, he doesn't take care of the house like he used to. He doesn't mow the lawn when he should. The house needs a new coat of paint." I thought, I can name this melody with 3 notes. I guess I gave away my thoughts. It was careless of me. "David, why are you grinning? This is serious work we are trying to do." "Sorry." And with that most insincere apology, my thoughts began to wander again, while my wife spoke. Ruth always insists that she come to our meetings with the charlatan in her own car. I'm at work, but I could easily pick her up, and we could go together. No, that will not do. And for some reason, she is never free during the day after our meetings. I was slow, I admit it, but eventually, I pulled the string. I hired a private detective to follow her starting the afternoon after our meetings. And as it turned out, after each session, she met with Bill Peterson at the Best Western Hotel along the highway. I expanded the coverage, and now it happened every Thursday, but only on Thursday. Why didn't they run away at every opportunity? It soon became apparent that this was not a new romance and had been going on for some time. That's when it dawned on me that she was keeping him at a distance. Even with her adulterous boyfriend, she couldn't risk letting him get too close. She was deeply broken. They had a permanent number, which made it easy for my private investigator to bring a camera and recorder into the room. After I saw this, therapy became just a waiting game until I got all my ducks in a row. Now I had 3 opponents to defeat: my wife, Bill, and Quack. When I was ready, I visited Bill's wife and gave her copies of all the documents. She used the services of my lawyer. She was not a very healthy woman, which caused me some concerns, but the lawyer assured me that even with her long-standing physical problems, she would be able to bring him to clean water. This seemed like the revenge I was looking for. "David! David! You listen?" "Eh? Oh, yes. I heard. The house needs new paint." Well, at that moment, there was a knock on the door. "Who the hell is this?" The charlatan stood up. "I will open. Anyway, this is for me." "To you? David, it's a session. This is a sacred time. What do you mean by arranging something outside?" I didn't give her time to finish. I opened the door, and there stood Bill and his beautiful, albeit frail, wife, Marie. "Welcome. Welcome. Just in time. I'm glad you were able to come. Come in." Bill looked confused. Marie looked like a purposeful woman. Her hand shook with neurological weakness as she placed the cane on each step, but she strode purposefully into the room. Bill clearly didn't know who I was. He extended his hand. "My wife made this appointment. Honestly, I don't know why we're here." "Well, let me explain, Bill." Turning to my right and pointing to my wife sitting on the sofa, I said, "You know my wife Ruth, don't you, Bill?" "I've heard of this, but never seen it." The color drained from his face and he became pale white. I don't lie, Bill. We're all friends here. Therapy sessions are a safe place. I stole this phrase from my first session with Charlatan." Coincidentally, at that moment she decided to speak out. "David, what's going on here? How can you interrupt a session like that?" "Sorry, Char. That is, Miss Jacobs. This is Bill Peterson. He has been having an affair with my wife for almost a year now. And before you say it's all my imagination, I have tons of pictures and videos of the 2 of them having sex at the Best Western." Turning to Bill, I said, "Bill, why don't you sit next to Ruth? If you can have sex with her, at least you can sit next to her while we deal with this unpleasant matter." Then, turning to Marie, I kissed her on the cheek and said, "Marie, I'm always glad to see you. Do you want this chair? It's amazingly comfortable." Smiling, she sat down and stared at her husband. I sat in the chair opposite her, so that the coffee table was between us, Ruth and Bill to my right, and Quack to my left. Still flapping my mouth like a fish out of water, that's when the mouth opens and closes, but makes no sounds. "Well, isn't this wonderful? Marie, you look beautiful as always. How do you feel today?" "Better than usual, David. Thanks for asking. I think a weight will be lifted off my shoulders soon." I smiled at this remark. Marie was a woman with real problems and a difficult future. Her optimism and cheerfulness were inspiring. "So, Ms. Jacobs told me earlier that all my thoughts about Ruth cheating on me are all in my head." Marie laughed. I looked around the room. "Who wants to see the photographs? I brought my tablet if anyone wants to watch one of the movies." Looking at Charlatan, I said, "And you? Want to watch this asshole please my wife in an affair you told me doesn't exist?" "No." You suddenly became quiet. Turning to Bill, I said, "You know, Bill, having sex with my wife is one thing, but I've been her husband for a long time. And despite her lies and betrayal, I still have a sense of responsibility for her well-being. You tend to have sex with her like a slut, Bill. You're doing this like a beast. You've never just made love to her, or maybe that's not what she likes right now." I looked at Ruth. "Maybe if I knew you wanted to be treated like this, you wouldn't cheat on me with that slimy coward behind my back." I never would have thought, but she was really crying. For me, this was incomprehensible. Apparently she knew our marriage was over. Bill's marriage was over. Now she could have Bill as much as she wanted and any other man. Why then the tears? All she was losing was me, and she made it clear that she didn't need me in the first place, except that perhaps she needed me to provide emotional stability that she couldn't provide herself. Ruth finally found her voice. "I never wanted you to find out. I'm sorry, David. I never meant to hurt you." And so on and so forth. moving down the list of cliches of deceivers. It was so pathetic it was almost funny. Stop pouring water, Ruth. You've had a year to think about your actions. Looking at the pathetic image of a man sitting next to her, I asked, "And what is your excuse? Your wife gave you 2 children who are now grown up and living independently. She has special needs and you repay her by playing pranks on the sly. Have you ever thought about becoming a man? Fulfilling your responsibilities and being honest with someone at least once in your life?" I could see the anger rising on his face, and I was more than ready for it if given the chance. But I didn't have one. In the end, the 2 of them sat there, offering worthless excuses and empty apologies, until there was another knock on the door. "Oh," I looked at Marie. "Looks like our last guest has arrived." Until this moment, the charlatan had been surprisingly silent. This caused her to have a second outburst of indignation, to which I simply shrugged and opened the door. A middle-aged man in a cheap suit entered the office, and I pointed him to the sofa. "It's them?" He walked up to the 2 scammers, handed each an envelope and said, "Ruth Harper, Bill Peterson, you've been served." Then he took a photo and turned away. That was the end of it. I guess it was his first time seeing someone in a marriage therapist's office, because as he passed by, he gave me a sly smile and quietly left the room. I closed the door behind him and returned to my place. Well, it's been a great day, hasn't it? From the wall clock, I see that our hour is already running out. Perhaps Ms. Jacobs will spend the last few minutes with the deceivers to help them understand what happened here today. I turned to her and added with a fair amount of sarcasm in my voice, "And perhaps you can understand how you could have gotten everything so terribly mixed up." I stood up, helped Marie to her feet, and took her hand as we left the office. Walking slowly down the corridor, I asked, "Are you going to be okay?" "I think yes. When you first showed me evidence of their betrayal, I was confused. I thought, how could the man I married do this to me? Now I know that he is not the man I married, and not the man I thought I married. All I lose are the memories or the illusion of what I thought I had, but didn't." It seemed to me that she spoke for both of us. She looked at me. "I still have children, and in a few years, there will be grandchildren. I'll be okay. You also have friends. Don't forget this. And perhaps in time, you will be able to count me among them." She smiled a sad smile and patted my hand. "I'm already counting." "In that case, what do you say about having lunch with a friend?" She smiled her first real smile all day. "With pleasure." We both drove to lunch in our own cars. It began with a melancholy meal when each of us silently recalled the sad events of the day. We knew this would happen. We planned this together. And yet it was the end of 2 marriages and the life we had built and considered ours. We talked about the 2 of them for a while and eventually decided it was time to move on. We talked about our children and everything that was happening in our city. We even discovered that we had a few mutual friends, and I knew they would support us both. You know that when this is all over, our friends will try to set us up on blind dates with all their single friends. At this thought, I involuntarily shuddered. She laughed quietly and said, "It won't be so bad. Who knows? You might even like it." All I could do was shake my head and sigh. As we talked, I became more and more optimistic about our future. In the end, I made it home without caring where the cheaters went, separately or together, or how they got there. Perhaps they left together to plan mutual defense or find lawyers, or perhaps they simply went to their weekly rendezvous. She most likely gave him a ride since Marie had their car. Of course, things have never been so simple. Arriving home later, Ruth went through all possible options for an apology. She even threw out a few reproaches, because we all know that when a woman cheats, her husband must be at least partly to blame. I wondered if Charlatan was still counseling her. When she finally ran out of steam and sat there sobbing, I decided it was my turn. I spoke briefly and to the point. "Ruth, throughout our marriage, I have felt sorry for you. The house you grew up in was hell on earth. I knew you were hurt by that life. but it seemed to me that you emerged mostly unscathed. I thought that if I could provide you with a truly loving marriage, you could heal and become the woman I knew you wanted to be. What I didn't realize was that you were incapable of healing. You are deeply broken. With every progress we made, with every successful coincidence of circumstances, you destroyed everything. You are not capable of being happy. All you know is sadness and destruction. I can't live like this anymore, and I don't want to live with a liar and a deceiver. It's over between us, Ruth. The children have grown up, and it's time for us to go our separate ways. I thought for a minute before finishing what I wanted to say. You need help, Ruth. You need real therapy, not this quack who tries to validate everything you say and justify everything you do. And when you find such a therapist, you must allow him to control the sessions. I know you, and you need to be in control. You won't get where you need to go if you control the journey. You need a true professional to guide you through the process of self-analysis so that you can get rid of the ghosts and demons that have haunted you since your youth. Please promise me that you will get real help. I doubt she heard my words. There were too many obstacles in her mind that prevented her from accepting the instructions, and the sad truth is that she was too much of a coward to face her demons. I admit that the decision to divorce Ruth was difficult for me. I kept coming back to my vows and remembering in sickness and in health. There was no doubt that Ruth was unwell. In the end, I decided that sick or not, Ruth knows right from wrong, and betrayal is still betrayal. 3 years have passed since that fateful meeting with the psychotherapist, and I move on with my life. The divorce was finalized just over 2 years ago. We split our lives in half, and I was ordered to pay child support for 3 years. Less than a year left. What I learned from all this is that when love dies and anger subsides, all that remains is a deep sense of sadness and loss. I lost what I had, but I lost it long before the divorce. And I lost what I could have had if I had ever had it to begin with. However, you cannot go through life focusing on what you have lost. I moved to the other side of town, kept the friends who eventually became my best therapy, and rebuilt my life with a new emphasis on the things I had always enjoyed and that I had too often given up because my wife wanted different things. In the process, I met a wonderful woman who shares my interests. We've both already been burned and are in no hurry. I'm optimistic, but I'm not in a rush. As for Bill, he got a pass. I wasn't about to go to jail just for a little revenge. Moreover, Marie needed him to earn a living so that he could pay for her upkeep. I think he got what he deserved. I believe this entire unfortunate experience taught me an important lesson. I realized that we can build a good life, or even a better life, if we remember who we are. Look forward and take advantage of what life offers us. As for my ex, I doubt she will ever be happy. It's just not in her nature to accept the joy that life offers and live it. She will always be looking for something more than what she has, losing what is most important in the process, and all the while she will refuse to invest a part of herself in the lives of the people around her. I'm sad for her, but now I know I can't change who or what she is, and all I can do is move forward. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.